Good evening, everybody. Those of you that are here in person, welcome. You guys get coffee, tea, and cookies. But all of you on Zoom, no cookies for you. We welcome you from Zoom. We welcome you from Facebook. We welcome you from YouTube, from all over the world. A special welcome to our community in Uganda that watches us regularly. It's a Jewish community there that they now have their weekly classes with us. And it's a pleasure to hear from them. Continue sending me emails whenever you have a moment. It's great to hear from you. The subject tonight is the game of life rigged. And I'm going to focus on the power of free will. So I'll begin with this forensic psychiatrist. His name is Dr. James Fallon. He's from the UC Irvine School of Medicine, and he is considered one of the world's leading experts on reading brain scans. In recent decades, this science has advanced so much that doctors and scientists are now able to pinpoint which functions of the brain are responsible for a person's specific emotions and behaviors. And Dr. Fallon in particular has been known to use brain imaging to diagnose various mental disorders. In fact, he would often be called by defense attorneys all over the world to testify on behalf of serial killers at their sentencing. And he would explain to the judge that the monstrous act committed by these individuals were not so much the result of a conscious choice, as much as the fact that their brains are wired that way. And that's the way they were born. They were wired to kill. And they had no choice. And he would put up these big brain scans and give the judge an education of brain scans and what you can see in the brain scans. In 2005, Dr. Fallon decided to expand his field of study by exploring what the brain scan can tell him about Alzheimer's disease. And for his test case, he decided that he would start with the scans belonging to the members of his own family. So there he is one afternoon. He's looking through a pile of family brain scans when he sees something that's absolutely shocking, something mind-blowing. The scan he's analyzing reads like a psychopath. He's looking for Alzheimer's, but that's not what he's seeing. He's seeing a psychopath. Very low brain activity in the frontal lobes, which are linked to empathy and morality and self-control. All the classic signs that he'd identified now hundreds upon hundreds of times of someone destined to do terrible things. How upsetting it is that he now knows that this scan belongs to someone in his greater family. So the first thing he did was check his PET machine to see that this must be some malfunction. There's no murderer in my family. But no, it was in perfect order. So then he confronted his research assistant, accusing him of, "You mixed up the scans on my desk." And the assistant double-checked and came back and said, "No, there's no mistake. Those scans came from the batch collected from the Fallon family." Now he's worried. Now, generally, while working with scans, the individual's identity remains anonymous. But in this case, he felt he simply had to find out the identity of the scan whose brain showed such signs. After all, this was a relative, someone within the family, who's clearly predisposed to committing who knows what sorts of atrocities. He's got to protect the rest of the family. This person has to be stopped before he has a chance to act. So he looks up the code for the scan and almost fainted. because it was his own. The psychopath brain pictured in the scan belonged to none other than James Fallon himself. The man who dedicated his life, the man who dedicated his career to the notion that psychopaths are wired that way, and therefore not accountable for their behavior, suddenly discovers that he himself is wired to harm and to maim and to torture and to kill. And yet he hasn't done any of those things, at least not yet. So perhaps it was time for him to rethink his own life's work. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe brain scans cannot tell you how people are predisposed to behave. So he then underwent a series of genetic tests. And what he found went from bad to worse. Because sure enough, those tests showed a gene linked to aggression. A gene linked to violence, to low empathy. He took other neurological and behavioral tests, and there again, there was no escaping the scientific conclusion that Dr. James Fallon is a certifiable psychopath. So, what would we do with such information about ourselves? If we were James Fallon and we come face to face with this conclusion, we hide it somewhere. The last thing we want to do is tell anyone. So how did Dr. Fallon deal with it? Well, perhaps because psychopaths are wired to be uninhibited, he went in the complete opposite direction. He published a book called The Psychopath Inside. He wrote a book about himself, how he would diagnose himself as a psychopath. He put everything in the book. And he tries to reconcile in his book how a happily married family man and an accomplished scientist like himself could have the exact same biological markings as a serial killer. Being totally honest, he reflects on his life and he realizes that he has done, in fact, he has shown certain psychopathic behaviors. He now thinks back and realizes, growing up, he was rather selfish. He was obnoxious. He was fiercely competitive. He realizes now that even when he plays a game, a board game with his grandchildren, he never lets them win. He's verbally aggressive. He comes on strong without realizing it. But yet with all those predispositions which would show him the pathway that he would use in court to show certain dispositions, he's never killed anyone. He never raped anyone. He never was violent towards anyone. He had these dispositions, but he never used violence at anyone. So how is that? How is he able to control his behavior while others with the same genetic and brain structure ended up behind bars? So he gives a couple of answers in this book. But the main conclusion is something very much in line with an important teaching of the Talmud of Judaism. The Talmud tells us that at the time of conception, an angel presents each new pregnancy to God. The angel brings this conceived child before God, and God will decree upon this soul that's about to enter into this world what physical attributes this child will have. The intellectual capacity of this human being. The status of this future person. What status this person will have in society. God will determine at that time the artistic talent, the athletic ability, the psychological profile that the person will have. Does that surprise anyone? Probably not, because for many of us, it confirms what we've suspected all along, that no matter how hard we may try to change and adjust different aspects of our lives and our personalities, sometimes we feel powerless to do so. That's just the way we are. We do feel at times wired to certain behaviors. Some of us are predisposed to being lazy. Others are quick to get angry. Some have more self-discipline, some have less self-discipline. Some are happier at times than others. Some are loud, some are not loud. Some are outgoing, some are more reserved. Some are emotionally closed, some are emotionally open. Some are more ambitious, some are unmotivated. So is the game rigged? Is it pre-programmed? Is it stacked against us? It seems that even the Talmud says so. So maybe we should stop fighting it and just accept this is who we are. Maybe. That thinking might be true and correct had the Talmud stopped there. But the Talmud continued that day, that the angel brings our soul before God Almighty to decree upon our soul its future life. The Talmud says everything that we mentioned before has one caveat. What the angel does not ask God is whether this person, this John Doe, is going to be righteous or wicked, good or bad, cruel or compassionate. Hakol bidei shamayim chutz miyira shamayim. Everything comes from heaven except the fear of heaven. Personalities, yes. Wisdom, yes. Athletic ability, yes. Whether you're going to be rich or poor, all predetermined for you. Whether you're going to be good or bad, not predetermined. Whether you're going to be righteous or wicked, not predetermined. That's up to each individual to use their free will to decide. So much about our lives is predetermined, except the essence of our character. You had no say where you were going to be born. You had no say who your father or mother would be. You had no say what city you would be brought up in. You had no say what the household was going to be like. You had no say about your siblings, about your teachers, about your fellow students. You had no say about some of the major decisions in life that helped shape you, but you had a say whether you're going to do good or bad in life, righteous or wicked. That is yours. That's not predetermined. Maimonides elaborates on this, affirming that we all have inborn traits, but that nature does not determine the quality, as he calls it, of the arc of our lives. In his words, do not think like the fools among the nations who say that a person's fate is sealed for them at birth. And he concludes, every person can become as righteous as Moses himself, or as evil as Yerovim ben Nevat, who was one of the evil characters in the Bible. He was the corrupt king of northern Israel who led people to idolatry and is considered one of the greatest sinners of Jewish history. You have that choice. You can become as great as Moses or as wicked as Yerovim. That's your free choice. Every human being, no matter who, no matter what, no matter when, no matter where, has the potential to be among the best of the best, or God forbid, the worst of the worst, or anywhere in the middle. Ultimately, it's up to you. And that is the main conclusion. What I taught you was from the Talmud and from Maimonides. But it's fascinating that that's the conclusion that Dr. James Fallon came up with. Same conclusion. His ability to overcome his genetic bias can be summed up, as he writes, in 2 words: free will. Whereas he once believed that people are mostly products of their genetics and just slightly products of their environment, all of that turned upside down with his discovery of his own slide, of his own testing. He now believes that yes, our genetics may give our lives certain parameters and limitations, but every person has an inner ability to overcome almost whatever factors may be pulling him or her in destructive or counterproductive directions. Based on his new outlook, James Fallon made new efforts to change his behavior, because now he knows he can. And in an interview, he put it this way: after having been a jerk all my life, I started to think of this experience as an opportunity to have something good come from it. I decided to try and use what could be considered faults, like narcissism, to take to an advantage, to find ways to utilize it for good. Knowing I have these traits, how can I use these traits to make good decisions? So every time I started to do something, I would stop and look at it and say to myself, don't do it. Don't do the selfish and self-serving thing there. Step by step, that's what I've been doing these past few years. And what do you know? The people around me, they like the new me better than the old me. I went from psychopath to a great guy. It's true that we're each dealt a unique set of cards in life. Every one of us in this room, everyone out there that's listening, we each have been dealt a different set of cards. How we play those cards is completely up to us. They're not equal between each other. We each have different challenges. They're not exactly the same. But what is the same is that we have the free will to play the cards the way we decide with our will to play them. None of our attributes are inherently bad. They're neutral. It's up to us to endow those aspects of our personality with value. Our traits may be preset, but how they're controlled and what we dedicate them towards, how we use them, that's entirely up to us. So you see, unlike angels, we human beings, we have physical bodies. The physical bodies have physical needs. The human body has drives, it has desires. The angels don't have to deal with any of this stuff. Unlike animals, we have spiritual souls that can exercise self-control. So indeed, we have something that no other created being has. Not the angels in heaven and not the animals on earth. We have free will. And only the human being has that. The angels do not have free will. The animals don't have free will. I know you all believe that Shamu has the free will to decide to smile to you or not. I'm sorry, it's not true. First of all, they shut down the Shamu show on SeaWorld after decades. And secondly, Shamu wants to eat fish. That's all. It was trained that if it makes believe it's smiling and throws some water at the splash zone, it gets some fish. It doesn't have the free will of the human being. This is what the Torah means when it says, B'Tselem Elokim Asa Adam. God created the human being in his own image. The only creation with this power of free will. It means that each of us have the ability to make our own moral choices and thereby chart our own course and choose our own destiny. And it's because we have free will that we're held accountable for our actions. Unlike what Fallon was saying to judges earlier in his career, that the person's not responsible because they're wired that way. We are responsible for our actions because we have free will. And because we have free will, our lives have meaning. And it is because we have free will that each and every one of us, no matter at what age or stage of life we may be, we have the ability to change. Each and every single one has the capacity to change at any point in life. Next week on the Jewish calendar is a holiday. Many of you are not aware of this holiday. It's called Pesach Sheni. It's the second Passover. It comes exactly a month after the first Passover. And the idea of the second Passover was, if anyone was not able to celebrate Passover in the days of the Holy Temple the first time around, there was a second chance. And the power of the message of this holiday is, it's never too late. We can always change. We can always do the things that we didn't do the first time around and make things different in our lives. There's a woman named Jennifer Teague. Jennifer Teague is the black daughter of a German mother and a Nigerian father. When she was very young, her mother, Monica, gave her up for adoption. At the beginning, she would visit her on occasion until she was around 7 years old, and then she stopped seeing her altogether. Nevertheless, Jennifer went on to make a good life for herself. She had a loving adoptive family. She attended the Sorbonne University in Paris, and then decided to go to Israel. She attended the University of Tel Aviv, and she became in love with the Israeli people and the Israeli culture. She learned to speak Hebrew. She learned to love falafel. She was having a good time. Years later, she's now 38 years old. She's happily married with a family of her own, and she's living in Hamburg, Germany. She's browsing one day in the library. She comes across a red book with a strange title. The title of the book was, "I Have to Love My Father, Right?" Question mark. Flipping through the pages, she discovered that it was co-authored by the daughter of one of the Nazi Germany's most infamous killers, someone named Amon Goth. He was the commandant of the Plaszow concentration camp. If you're familiar with the movie Schindler's List, he was the villain of the movie Schindler's List. She looks at the picture of the author on the cover of the book, and she eerily resembled a person she had once known. And she starts reading the biographical details more closely, and it hits her like a ton of bricks. The author, going now by the name of Monica Hertwig, was formerly Monica Goth, her birth mother. The notorious Nazi was her biological grandfather, a grandfather who was a monster. She had a grandmother who stood by his side. She had a mother who did not denounce him and wrote a book that she has to love her father even though he committed these atrocities. All of this threw her into a tailspin of anger and pain and guilt. She went on a series of trips. She went to the concentration camps. She went back to Israel. She met with survivors, trying to come to terms with these revelations and what it all means to her. Eventually, she publishes a book of her own, chronicling her journey. And the title of her book, different than her mother's book, was "My Grandfather Would Have Shot Me," referring to the fate that she would have suffered at the hands of the Nazis on the account of her skin color. Today, Jennifer Teague is a full-time motivational speaker, and one of the most powerful messages that she delivers in her talks is that we can decide for ourselves who and what we want to be. In her own words, our genetics do not determine who we are. Our souls determine that. And she has told her story to thousands around the world using the legacy of one of the most reviled men in history to inspire many to overcome their challenges. Most of us, thankfully, do not have the baggage of a Jennifer Teague. But we all have some baggage. We all have stuff. In Yiddish, we call it a pekel, a package. We all carry a package of our own burdens, of our own past negative experiences that we carry through life. Whether it's issues with our parents or our children or family members, relationships, schools, religion, careers, physical health, mental health, social pressures, financial pressures. We each have challenges that we have to overcome. We each have our own demons to slay, our own temptations, our own impulses, our own predispositions. Nobody gets off scot-free in their lives, including those whom you think have it easy. They have their own pekel. They have their own difficulties. So sure, we can spend our lives replaying over and over and over again everything that's gone wrong. We can bemoan everything we've been deprived of, pointing fingers of blame at everyone around us. It was our teacher's fault. It was our parents' fault. It was our classmates' fault. It was the rabbi's fault. It's the politician's fault. Well, some of that may be true. But we can use our past history and our current drawbacks as perfectly valid excuses for living stagnant lives. And if we do so, at the end of the day, the only one who loses in that scenario is ourselves. If we want to spend our lives just blaming others for the difficulties and the struggles we face, we can do that for 120 years. But there's another alternative. And the other alternative is to tell ourselves that for whatever reason, this is the burden that I've been saddled with. But as a human being and as a Jew, I choose, yes, I choose to not be broken or weighed down by this. I can and I will rise above this and make something better of my life, either in spite of what I've been through or even because of it. There's a rabbi that I once heard talking, and he uses this phrase. He calls it choice points, and I'll explain what he means by it. He says everyone has their unique choice points. Choice point is that situation in which we have at that very moment to put free will into high gear. A challenging moment when we need to decide one way or the other. Now, what might be a test and a challenge for you may not necessarily be a struggle for someone else, and vice versa. Everyone has different challenges. I've often said that when I pass, whether it's a Red Lobster or a Black Agnes restaurant or any of these restaurants that people die to get into, I have no struggles whatsoever. I often talk about the supermarkets, the lobsters walking around over there. I got no struggles with that. But I know people that have gone kosher midlife, and they struggle greatly with the foods that they were accustomed to. I have my own struggles. We each have our own struggles. And a lot of that is based on our dispositions and our upbringing. We each have our own struggles. But there are those times in life when we're facing a choice. It's a critical choice. And we need to summon within ourselves the strength and the courage at times to make that right choice. The choices that flow after that first choice point will be a lot easier. But it's that first battle, that's where the struggle lies. The factors leading up to that choice point moment may be predetermined, out of our hands. God set it into motion. He put all the props together for you to enter the stage at this particular time, and now the choice is yours. Free will. What you decide at that moment will determine where this production goes, where this play goes, where this movie goes, based on that choice that you make. I'll tell you a story that best explains this. It's a story about a survivor of one of the Polish ghettos during World War II. Now we know that before the Jews were loaded onto cattle cars and sent off to camps, at first they were crammed into horrible ghettos. And they lived in these ghettos for an extended period of times where they were forced to live in subhuman conditions. They would take all the Jews out of their homes in their communities. They would force them into this ghetto area, and they could put 10 Jews to one room and force them to live this way. There was disease rampant throughout the ghettos. Many perished, died right there from malnutrition, lack of food, lack of water, lack of health. So one day in the Podlaska ghetto, there was a woman named Leah Fuchs. Leah Fuchs was the mother of a large family. And she found herself quite ill. She was hoping that the next day she would feel better, but the next day she felt worse. And the same the day after, the same the day after. The aches and pains and the symptoms were just getting worse and worse and worse. She wasn't so much afraid of dying, but it was the fact that she had a large family with many little children. And if she didn't survive, they had no chance of surviving. So she knows she needs to live for them. As her condition worsened, she knows I gotta get help. Somehow I gotta get help. She put together the last few zlotus, the currency that she could. She found a way to flee the ghetto, to sneak out in the middle of the night. And she goes to the home of Dr. Magda Bukowski. She was a Polish doctor who's someone that Leah Fuchs knew before all of this began. It was her doctor. She knocks on Dr. Bukowski's door. Dr. Bukowski opens the door and sees her there. And she yells out, "How dare you? How dare you come to my house? A Jewish woman coming here, leaving the ghetto? Go away. You're putting yourself at jeopardy and you're putting me at jeopardy. Leave my doorstep now and go back. Go back now." At that point, Leah begs the doctor for compassion. Not for herself, but for her children. "My children are totally reliant on me. I won't survive like this. I will die. And if I die, they will die. So I'm begging you, help me. Just give me some medicine. Just give me something to get my health back." Whatever it was that won her over, Dr. Bukowski glances quickly in both directions and ushers Leah into our house. She examines her and gives her medication. Leah thanks her and tries giving her the money that she brought with her, but the doctor declines to take the money. She finds herself suddenly more compassionate and more understanding. Dr. Bukowski then proceeds to inquire about the conditions inside the ghetto. What's it like in there? What is life like? How many people to an apartment? Although she lived only a few blocks away, she might as well have been living on another planet. The Polish people, some consciously and some subconsciously, wanted to turn a blind eye and pretend that the war crimes were not occurring daily, practically under their noses. But now she's hearing directly from Leah Fuchs about how inhumane and how unlivable conditions were in the ghetto. She heard rumors, but she couldn't have fathomed how bad things really were. And she says to Leah Fuchs, "In your condition, you can't go back to the ghetto. You won't survive there." And then she continues and she says, "I know it will be a dangerous move, but I have an attic above my house, and I'm willing to hide you there." The sudden about-face was startling, but Dr. Bukowski was obviously appalled by what she heard, and now she wants to help. Leah was very grateful to the offer, and she would have happily taken it, but for one minor problem. "That's so kind of you," she said, "but I have 13 people directly under my care. My children and my parents, they need me, and I can't leave them." At that point, the doctor didn't even hesitate. "Then bring all 13 over here and I'll hide them all. Find a way to sneak them out, sneak them to my house. I will put them in my attic and I will hide them here." Over a period of the next 2 weeks, each one disguised themselves in order to somehow sneak out of the ghetto and make that short, life-threatening journey to the Bukowski house. Within a week, they were all there. And there they remained for the next 6 years. This remarkable Polish doctor had 14 Jews in her attic for 6 years. Even more astonishing is the fact that Dr. Bukowski's home was situated right across from the Gestapo headquarters. Everyday Gestapo officers who specialized in finding Jews walked by her home. She knew very well the fate suffered by other righteous Gentiles who risked their lives to save Jews and were caught because they would dangle them from ropes in town square for their treacherous behavior. They would be hung in public. And yet that didn't stop her. 6 years after Leah's initial visit to Dr. Bukowski's home, the Germans were finally defeated. And Leah and her 13 charges left the attic. They left malnourished, weak, traumatized, but alive. God had sent a special angel to watch over them. Eventually they all recovered, and they reestablished their lives, building a family. Years later, Leah Fuchs, together with multitudes of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, gathered for a reunion in the United States of America. At that time, there were now 300 family members. They all gathered together with one non-family member, their guest of honor, Dr. Bukowski, who was still alive, the heroic and compassionate doctor. How does something like that happen? How does a non-Jewish Polish woman come to exhibit such self-sacrifice, risking everything to save a woman and her entire family, especially after at first seeming so cold and so uncaring? And so one family member that was there said, "It happened the moment Dr. Bukowski decided to let my grandmother come inside." One choice point. One choice. The moment she made that choice, the moment she opened the door, the moment she told my grandmother, "Come in so that I can give you some medicine," everything changed that would come thereafter. All choices that would come were already paved. She had one powerful choice to make, to close her eyes or not to close her eyes. But the moment she opened that door, Leah Fuchs was part of her life already. She made that choice. And now anything else that needed to be done would come naturally from her. That's the choice point moment. The moment that you need to find the courage to make that choice, because everything that will come after would be a lot easier than that first choice. You're not a victim of your circumstances. You're a human being that's created in God's image. And regardless of our situations, we always have choices. We have moral choices to make. We have spiritual choices to make. We have emotional choices to make. As long as we can remember the difference between what is under our control and what is not in our control, you'll be amazed by the elevating, liberating, and rewarding changes you're capable of making in your life. One thing to always bear in mind is that the only person that you can really change is yourself. Somebody once put it this way: everyone has an inflow pipe and an outflow pipe. The outflow pipe is your own thoughts, your words, your actions. And the inflow pipe is everything else. When it comes to your outflow pipe, you have 100% control of what you're going to say and what you're going to do next. When it comes to everything else, you have very little say in life. What happens to you by the outside world, you have very little control. You have control over yourself. You may not be in control of everything that happens at the office, but you can choose to put a smile on your face for your spouse and your kids when you walk through the front door at the end of the day. That's your inflow. That's your choice. It's easy to blame it and say, "I had a rough day at the office," and let it out on everyone else. But you have the choice. That choice is yours. The operative word is to choose. You get to choose how to respond to every situation. When you say these words, "He made me angry," "She made me angry," it's an oxymoron. Another person cannot make you angry any more than another person can make you fat. You make that choice to eat the chocolate cake. That's your choice. You can say that person brought it to me. You can say that person was eating it in front of me. The fact is, you chose to eat the cake. You chose to get angry. That person may have done things that might add to your emotional response, but you can choose. You can choose. You can make the choice how to respond. You could choose acceptance. Okay, so they're angry, so they said things, they said a nasty word to me. You can choose transcendence, to rise above it. You can choose compassion for the offending party. After all, they have the misfortune of having to live with themselves all the time. You just have to see them a few minutes a day. They got to be with themselves all the time. You can be compassionate for them. But that choice is yours. Now, I'm not saying this to make it all easy. We all fall into anger moments. We all do this. But to have to stop and think that the choice of responding to anything that goes out, that choice is left with you. When we choose the high road, when we choose a loftier response instead of the impulsive response, you transform yourself from the victor to the victor, from the victim to the victor. Life is short, the saying goes, stop spending time that you don't have on people you don't like, doing things you don't want to do. The Lubavitcher Rebbe put it this way. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. A lot has to do with your own perception. You control your choice. Real change starts with a change of perspective. Years ago, there was a woman named Shendel. She was 14 years old when the story started. She lived in Crown Heights. And they opened in Crown Heights at the time a new Chabad girls' high school. Her father really wanted her to go to this new school. And started putting the pressure on Shendel that I think it's a good school for you to go to, so I'm thinking of enrolling you. And at 14 years old, this girl wanted to assert her independence. And she didn't like that her father was pressuring her to make this choice to go to this new school. And so she said, I'm not going. I don't want to be, quote unquote, a test case for a new program. I want to attend the established school. That's where my friends are going. I'm not going to this new test case school. Her father was disappointed. For whatever reason, he felt it was a good match for her daughter. After this going back and forth and arguing back and forth, he throws out a suggestion. And he says to his 14-year-old daughter, why don't you ask the Lubavitcher Rebbe's opinion? You'll write a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. You'll say that I am encouraging you to go. You will say in the letter why you don't want to go. And you'll leave it up to the Rebbe to decide. She liked that idea because that gave her independence. She's controlling the letter. She's writing the letter. She's going to put her feelings in the letter. And she trusts the Lubavitcher Rebbe enough that she will go by his decision. So she writes a letter. And when she tells this story, she writes that she wrote what she called an honest letter, but it was rather bold. And she says, in thinking back, maybe I shouldn't have used such language in writing to such a holy man. Because she wrote the line, I do not want to be a guinea pig. I don't know if writing to the Lubavitcher Rebbe that you don't want to be a guinea pig was the best choice, but that's what she wrote. When she reflects on this years later, and she thinks about it, she says, I wanted it to be honest. I wanted it to be me. I wanted it to be how I was feeling. So I just put it out there in words. A few days later, she gets an answer. There's a response from the Lubavitcher Rebbe to this 14-year-old girl's question about not wanting to be a guinea pig. The answer has her original letter back there, which the Rebbe did often. He would use your letter and he would respond by circling particular words, writing on your letter, but you would see the letter that you wrote with the Rebbe's comments on it. So here's her letter back, and it has a very simple, slight modification to it. In the Rebbe's handwriting, the Rebbe crosses out the word guinea pig, and writes the word chalutza. Chalutza means pioneer instead of guinea pig. Now, the Rebbe still puts the choice back to her, but just reframes it. No one's asking you to be a guinea pig. What's being asked of you is, would you like to be a pioneer? Now it's your choice. Think it over, and you make the decision. I won't make it for you. You decide. With one simple word, the Rebbe was telling this teenager, no one's asking you to be a test case. You're being asked to be a trailblazer. You're being asked to be unique, to be special, to forge a new path. And she responded, Chalutza, you want me to be a pioneer? I'm in. Pioneer, that I can do. I'll do anything to be a pioneer. It's many, many years after this particular story. And today, this school has a principal, and her name is Shendel. It's this 14-year-old pioneer girl that is now the principal of the school that has hundreds and hundreds of students and has had thousands of students over the years. We reframe the situation and we shift course in the way we make our decisions. Hasidic philosophy talks a great deal about it. It's called ishapcha. Ishapcha means that sometimes instead of pushing back against a situation, the better approach is to turn it on its head, to reframe it, to redirect it completely. Someone once asked the Rebbe what he can do to rid himself of his inflated ego. That's a good question to ask a spiritual leader, right? I got this terrible inflated ego. Rebbe, help me get rid of this ego. The Rebbe replied, why get rid of it? Why not live up to your own great expectations of yourself? Be the amazing person you believe you are. There's an advantage to having this ego because that means you think greatly of yourself. Well, now try to live what you imagine yourself to be. Now, this may seem contrary to classic Hasidic thought, which emphasizes the importance of bittul, of humbling, of the nullification of one's ego. But oftentimes, the best way to nullify something negative is not by crushing it, not by suppressing it, but by harnessing its power, by transforming it into something positive, by channeling it from a destructive force into a constructive one. So how do we do that? By making bold choices, even when they're not the easiest ones. When we exercise this free choice, when we utilize our free will, we then build on the muscles of the free choice power that we have within us. It gets stronger. Just like when you work out, your muscles get stronger. When you utilize that free will for positive things, your free will gets stronger and stronger. And we learn how to embrace the struggle, how to push through, how to meet the challenges, how to transcend the obstacles. We all have the ability to change our behavior. We all have the ability to change our lives. And this ability comes from the neshama, from the soul, from the spark of the divine that we have within us. As Jews, it also comes from our Torah, which has been passed on from one generation to the next generation. It's the inheritance which belongs to each and every single Jew, bar none. No matter what your upbringing, no matter what your background, no matter what your Jewish education or lack thereof may have been until now, the Torah was and will always be your birthright, your heritage, your legacy. It belongs to you just as much as it belongs to every single Jew on the face of the earth. Rabbi Manis Friedman once related how he was once meeting with a young couple that was going through a bit of a rough patch in their marriage. And at one point in their discussion, he brought up the subject of mikvah and the laws of family purity. And he explained that beyond the spiritual benefits of the mitzvah, when a husband and wife have some time in the month that they're not physically intimate, and then are reunited that way on the night that she immerses in the mikveh, it introduces this new freshness, this vitality to the relationship. It helps the marriage. And the couple was very intrigued by this whole idea of mikvah and separation and family purity. They never heard about it before. Now the strange thing was that the months leading up to their wedding, although they were not raised Orthodox, they made a decision. Their decision was, we want to do an Orthodox wedding. We want to go for the higher standard, they thought. So we want that the wedding itself should be all according to Orthodox tradition. So they found an Orthodox rabbi. They met with an Orthodox rabbi and they said, we want you to do our wedding. Whatever we need to do. The rabbi says it needs to be kosher. Okay, we'll do kosher food. It can't be on the Sabbath. Okay, it won't be on the Sabbath. Everything he asked for, we did. How the ksubah was to be written, everything. But he never said a word to us about this mikveh thing. Sometime later, Rabbi Friedman had an occasion to meet that rabbi somewhere. And he says, can I talk to you for a minute? I've been counseling this couple. And they told me that they looked to have an Orthodox wedding. And they had you officiate. He says, yeah, I remember the wedding. He said, but they said that they didn't hear anything about mikveh, about family purity. And he said, that couple, they would have been interested in mikveh. They didn't look the type. And he says, I question the type. What exactly is the type? Does she have to have fins? If she came with goggles, that's the type? What does that mean, the type? Every Jew is the type, because every Jew is an owner of the Torah. And every Jewish tradition belongs to every Jew. Whether they practice it or not, it's yours. There's no such thing as a type. There's no such thing as a Reformed Jew, a conservative Jew, an Orthodox Jew, a Reconstructionist Jew. There's only a Jew. And all of the Torah belongs to every single Jew. Some practice more, some practice less. Some were raised with it, some weren't. But it's all belonging to each and every single one of us. Every mitzvah belongs to every single one of us. The mitzvah of tefillin is yours just as much as it belonged to Moses. No difference whatsoever. There's no types of Jews. Every Jew, by virtue of their neshama, inherently wants to live an upright, sacred, and meaningful way of life. And every Jew, at whatever stage in life, has the ability to grow and to make changes and to come closer and to grow in their Judaism. Like Dr. Bukowski opening the door to let Leah Fuchs at this critical choice point. Every journey of consequence begins with a single step. All it takes is that initial step. And from there, things have a way of progressing in a continuous chain reaction. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory once said, to be a Jew is to be creative. And our greatest creation is ourself. Indeed, the entire Torah, he says, is replete with accounts of people who reinvented themselves. They all go through drastic changes. Abraham grew up in an idol-worshipping home, and he became the father of the Jewish people. He reinvented himself. He changed. Moses started out as a man who could barely speak. I am not a man of words, he says. I am of slow speech and tongue. And yet, at the end, he becomes the most eloquent and visionary of all the prophets. He reinvents himself. We all have that ability to reinvent ourselves. I want to conclude with one final story. Although the suffering of Greek Jewry during World War II may not be as well known as that of the Jews of other European countries, the Jews of Greece actually endured a greater percentage of loss, almost more than any other country, percentage-wise. 85% of the Jews of Salonika were killed, most of them in Auschwitz. However, there were a few survivors that rebuilt their lives anew. Among the survivors was a young man named Ovadia Baruch. Ovadia Baruch, who after a number branded on his arm, felt his life slipping out of him. He was all alone. No family, no friends. He walked around the camp like a zombie. But then to his great fortune, he was given the job of doling out soup to his fellow inmates. He lucked out because not only did he now have access to the kitchen, but he also had the ability to help other starving Jews. Being that he had access to food, he would try to slip some food into his pocket when no one was looking to help other Jews who were starving to death. In the same camp, on the other side of the camp, was a young woman. Her name was Aliza Tzarfati. Aliza Tzarfati was also from Greece. She, however, was not given any plum assignments. In fact, Aliza, unfortunately, was sent to the dreaded Block 10. What was Block 10? That was where the cursed Nazis conducted their grotesque medical experiments, often robbing young women of their ability to bear children. And it was to that vile infirmary that Aliza was now being led. She had heard from others what it means if you're sent to that building. She knew what was about to happen. She was being taken with trepidation and with fear. As much as she tried to summon her faith that I will survive, knowing what was about to happen, it completely took her over. As she enters the clinic from hell, she looks up, and what filled her was this new level of hate and disgust. Because she recognized the individual going in and out, performing those experimental procedures, was none other than Dr. Jacob Samuels, a Jewish doctor. And when it was her turn, she looks up at the doctor, and with every ounce of anger building up inside, she yells out, "How could you? It's one thing for a Nazi beast to do this to us, but for a Jew, for what? To save your own hide? What, are they giving you some extra food? Unconscionable. How could you? Shame on you." And she's yelling insults at this Jewish doctor. A few moments later, it was over. It was all over. The procedure that would prevent Aliza from ever having children. She was shattered. If she would never have a family of her own, what was there to live for? A few days later, Aliza was walking past the back of the kitchen area, and she hears someone screaming in Greek from behind the building. She knows Greek. It's her native language. And so she runs over and she sees an SS guard is mercilessly beating on a young man. She knew that if she didn't get involved and try to save this man will be dead in a few minutes. You see, our friend that we started our story with was caught taking some extra food, and he was being beaten to death for it. And she yells out at the top of the lungs to stop, stop. And for some inexplicable reason, her cries somehow stopped the savage in his tracks. And he just left the Jew on the ground and he walked away. Ovadia Baruch is there lying on the ground bleeding. And he sees this girl who saved his life. Being a fellow landsman, they're both from Greece, they begin to talk for a few minutes. So overwhelmed was Ovadia by the emotions of the moment that he blurts out to Aliza on the spot, "If we both survive, let's get married." We're both from Greece, we speak the same language. Aliza couldn't help but burst out laughing. It was the first time she laughed in months at this proposal for a marriage with him lying on the ground bleeding. And she says, "Look, you don't know me, and if you did know me, you would never want to marry me." And with that, they went their separate ways. Over the next 2 years, their paths did not cross again. Even so, Ovadia never forgot this brave woman who saved his life. When the war was over and the camp was liberated, he began to search high and low for Aliza, hitting many dead ends, but after many months, he finds her. And although they hadn't seen each other in over 2 years, Ovadia never forgot her kindness. And moreover, now removed from the horrors of the camp, her outer beauty matched her inner beauty. And once again, in spontaneous fashion, he asks her to marry him. Now that the question was more serious and for real, she had to reveal to him why she thought he wouldn't be interested if he knew everything about her. And he tells Ovadia, I was taken to that infirmary building number 10. I was one of their experiments. I will never have children. Find someone that could bear children. And Ovadia wouldn't hear from it. Ovadia said, I feel we're destined to get married. And if we can't have children of our own, then we'll adopt children. Or we'll help others with their children. It won't stop me from wanting to marry you. And after much persuasion, Eliza agreed and they got married. And sometime later, they were given the opportunity to go to the land of their dreams, and they grabbed it. Ovadia and Eliza moved to Israel. A few months later, Eliza wasn't feeling well. She went to see a doctor. And after examining her, the doctor says, you're pregnant. So she says to the doctor, you're making a mistake, there's something wrong. I can't be pregnant. And she tells the doctor why she won't be pregnant. Doctor does the tests again and says, you're pregnant. You're with child. She's overjoyed but very confused. And they begin to do some research and they discover that there were many like her, young women, who had Dr. Samuels the day that they were brought for the experiments, and they were all having children. How could it be? They investigated and found out Dr. Samuel's secret. He had volunteered for the position. He wanted to be the doctor on call. Because what he did was never what they wanted him to do. And when the Nazis found out what Dr. Samuels was doing, they didn't just execute him, they tortured him for days until they killed him. 6 months later, Eliza and Ovadia Baruch were holding their beautiful newborn baby boy at a bris. And they named him Yaakov, after the righteous doctor, Dr. Jacob Samuels of saintly memory. When faced with the most critical and consequential choice point of his life, Dr. Samuels did not choose the easy way. Although he knew he would pay a heavy price for it, he chose to rise above the animal and become the angel. The angel that will allow Jewish children to be born for generations to come. As human beings, we have that power of free will. We're able to make choices that can better our lives and better the lives of others. We can make the world a better and brighter place. When we're presented with those opportunities, let us seize them to forge a new way forward. Let's take advantage of this gift that God gave the human being. The gift and the power of free will to change our own lives and the lives of those around us. Thank you very much. I do want to announce that there is a lecture this Thursday evening, May 16th at 7:30. We are going to have Commander Yossi Blooming from the IDF, who's on a short break. He'll be flying pretty soon back to the front lines in Gaza. If you want to hear from someone what it's like on the front lines in Gaza, this Thursday, 7:30, right over here in this room on the front lines in Gaza. Please tell your friends about it as well. Have a good night. Thank you for joining.